Welcome to Wheels, Deals, and Meals, where we talk all things good food, good business, and good cars. And now, here is your host, Arnold Gasita, founder and CEO of Petra Automotive Products. Let's roll.
Well, I'm excited. Today's show is a very special show, especially for anybody in Houston who grew up with Sakowitz department store. But I got to meet Robert Sakowitz a few months ago, I would say a couple months ago. Interesting, fascinating gentleman, and what a story. But anyway, I asked Robert if he would be on the show. He graciously said yes. Robert, thanks for being on the show.
Pleasure. Nice to see you, sir.
You too.
Again.
Dude, so where were you born?
I was born St. Joseph's Hospital in Houston, Texas.
So always Houstonian.
Always a Houstonian, except for college and a little time afterwards. But my family, my great-grandfather left what was then Russia, is now Ukraine, about 30 miles or clicks south of Kyiv. And even then, the Russians didn't love the Ukrainians, so they were going to be conscripted into the army, he and his eldest son, and he knew they were, cannon fodder.
Right.
So he left his wife and his other two infant children, and infant boys and one girl, came to Ellis Island. They couldn't read Cyrillic Russian, so Shakevich looks like that's an S maybe, and an A and a K, the Russian, Cyrillic Russian. And the ch at the end looks like an upside down a question mark. Yeah, it's an ITZ. So they created the name Sakowitz.
So Sakowitz was created on Ellis Island?
Yes, it was created on Ellis Island, and actually means, when you translate and look up the etymology, it's son of sack. So he probably was, the generations back, was a sack maker for all the wheat in the Ukraine. He and his son couldn't get work because there were too many people in New York who were coming in. And there was a group from Galveston proselyting, come to Texas because it's, the Wall Street of the South, and it was then. Galveston was his thriving community, great port, cotton, cattle, timber, rice, amazing. And so he became a peddler, selling ship stores to the sailors, made enough money to send for his or the rest of his family, and they came directly in through Galveston, since that was then the second largest to Ellis Island, through a ship. So when people say, "How did your family get here, Ellis Island or Galveston?" I say both, because great-grandfather came here, and
what an amazing history and story.
So they were in Galveston. They survived the 1900 hurricane floods, a terrible disaster. And my grandfather and his brother, my great uncle Simon, my grandfather Tobias, the two of them started, they worked from the time, back there, and there was no child labor law. So they started working at like age 12 or 13. Their mother saved the money for them. And at the ages of, my grandfather was 21 and Uncle Simon was 19, they started a little gentleman's haberdashery. Actually, just haberdashery meant cuffs and detachable collars, and they didn't have the money.
Like accessories.
Yeah, they didn't have the money for clothing.
Right.
And were successful.
Now, where was his first store?
It was on Market Street in Galveston. It's on Galveston.
Market Street
1902 in Galveston.
So living in Galveston, first store in Galveston.
Absolutely.
Grandfather and great-grandfather.
Grandfather, great-grandfather, and great-uncle.
Okay.
I mean, an uncle, excuse me, Uncle Simon. My father's brother, grandfather's brother.
Yeah.
Tobias and Simon. And so in 1910, when Simon got married and Tobias had become married, they built this little, opened a little store in Houston, which was then beginning to grow rather substantially. The store was on Main and Preston. Little Gentleman's Haberdashery Plus added some other men's.
Still have the Galveston one, or
men's-
close the Galveston one?
Oh, it was still, that was the big store in
Oh,
Galveston.
okay.
so to
Big
speak.
store in Galveston. Now they've opened a second location.
Right, exactly.
In Houston,
With,
okay.
with his brother. That really helps to create a major draw to Houston. And the storm of 1915 comes along and was actually a more devastating hurricane, but because they had built this 17-foot seawall in Galveston, not as many people perished as opposed to the 8,000 to 10,000 that perished in 1900. So my grandfather said, that's it. Galveston's never coming back. The Houston Ship Channel has been opened, and let's move everything up to Houston. So they did, and they expanded to a store, larger store coming down Main Street on Main and Prairie. My father was what's called BOI, born on the island, so he was born. And the store prospered with Houston. Always did. Always, the critical point here is that it always, shall we say, followed or performed with the fortunes of Houston. Up
Yeah,
and
it
down.
follows, such as Houston, such as Houston,
Up and
such as Houston. Okay, so let's get the name down. So Robert Sakowitz, you are the great grandson
of the immigrant of my
who opened the
person who
store
came-
in Galveston,
No, who was the peddler in Galveston, my great grandfather.
who was the peddler in Galveston.
Right, my grandfather and his brother Simon
Opened
opened the little store.
Who then opened the
Men's
second store in Houston.
Right.
Later decided to close the store in
Galveston
Galveston, and
after
we all
the
moved
second
45 miles north.
Yes.
Okay, so now,
Same 45 miles that is the Houston Ship Channel.
yeah, that's right. So we moved 45 miles north, and they have this thriving store, still mainly men's accessories, right?
Men's accessories, and then apparel, and then boys.
How long was it men's and boys only before they decided to do something else?
In 1927, there was a battle going on for those Houston history buffs, between the family of Ross Sterling, Humble Oil and Refining, one of the 5 founders, families. The Sterling family was buying land up and down Texas Avenue, east and west, and said it will follow the ship channel. And Jesse Jones, who was a major banker, developer, bought north and south on Main Street. And there was a battle as to how Houston was going to grow, east, west, or north, south. Jesse Jones, who everybody called him Uncle Jesse, called my grandfather, and he said, Tobo, I want you to come over to my office. Well, when Jesse Jones called, how high do you want me to jump?
Right.
So he did go visit him, and he said, Tobo, I understand you want to expand. And he said, yes, sir, but I bought a little piece of property. We bought a piece of property on Main and Walker. So it's on Main Street. And he said, I know, I understand, and that's very good. You hold on to that, and, you're going to make a lot of money on that. And he said, what do you mean? Well, I'm going to put an end to this nonsense. That was his famous quote my grandfather told me. I'm going to put an end to this nonsense about how Houston's going to grow. I'm going to build the largest, tallest building west of the Mississippi on Main and Rusk. And you're going to take the first 5 floors. Of course, you had to scrape my grandfather up off the floor at that point, saying, how are we going to do that? And he said, I'm going to give you a lease that's very, very favorable. I'll pay for the furniture, fixtures, and equipment. All you need to do is put your merchandise in there and take care of your charge account for your customers. And Mr. Tobe, my grandfather, said, what am I going to do with 5 floors? Well, back then, much the same as they did in Europe for decades, there were specialists who would be leased departments in Grand
The
Emporium,
department store.
in the
Yeah.
in department stores. They weren't all owned merchandise back then. So he said, get, somebody who's a specialist in women's and in shoes and all that kind of stuff and build yourself a department store. And my grandfather agreed to it, went out and got just exactly that, a women's millinery specialist in apparel and all, accessories. And in July of 1929, the Gulf Building opened. They were the first 5 floors, and then the Gulf Oil took above it. August, September, October. 3 months later was the crash of 29. Had they not done that, you would not be talking to me as a former retailer, because I'm sure we'd have not been in that business. I have an expression that I learned a long time ago from someone, which is, if you think you're in control, forget
Think
it.
again. Yeah,
He's
for
in
sure.
control.
100%. 100%. Never think you're in control. And it kind of slips your mind sometimes, and you think you are, but there's always something that happens that reminds
you do the best you
you,
can. You do the best you
Okay, so just so that, because I find your story, as I know that so many people are going to find it so fascinating, right? So, immigrants, Ellis Island, and Galveston. Your grandfather and his brother open a store in Galveston.
Mm-hmm.
Then they open another one in Houston. Mm-hmm. Everybody moves to Houston.
Right.
And now they expand to a third store. And then they have
Third location.
They're
They're closing these other stores.
Right. Third location. Move to another location.
Yeah, exactly.
And then Jesse Jones calls them up and says, I'm building this building. I'm going to give you 5 floors. Mm-hmm. They come in, put this thing together, right? Still your grandfather and uncle. Mm-hmm. And this is 1929.
Grandfather and great uncle.
Grandfather and great uncle, 1929.
Right.
Then the market goes crazy.
Market
Then everything
crashes.
Yeah.
Crashes.
But they have this great favorable
Deal.
that allows them to stay alive.
And not only stay alive, but the Depression didn't hurt. The 30s Depression didn't hurt Houston as badly as it did, of course, New York and elsewhere. I'm sorry, sir.
Is the Gulf building still around?
Sure. Main and Rusk. It's now Texas Commerce Bank.
Okay.
Chase. Yes.
Okay.
It's the northwest corner of Main and Rusk. Sure, it's still around. And because of that deal, when people would come in, when men would come in and didn't have the money to buy a suit for an interview to get a job, the Sakowitz brothers gave him credit. And decades later, when I was running the operation, I can't tell you the number of people. I'll tell you the most explicative of that I'm saying. I was downstairs. I was CEO and president at the time, and get a phone call. Margaret Askins, my secretary, says, "Mr. Robert, they want you in the bridal department." I said, "Okay, what's it all about?" She said, "Well, it seems that there's a gentleman and his daughter is trying to make up her mind between 2 dresses, and they want you to come up and make the decision for them." And I said, "Okay, that happened frequently." And so I go up, and, beautiful young lady, their daughter, and she looks wonderful in both of them, but I told them why I thought this one particular one was better. So the father says, "Great." And the mother says, "Fine. Would you mind holding that one? Put it on hold," she tells our buyer, "while we, go look, because I want to also go have a look at Neiman's and see what they have." And the father says, "No." And I looked at the mother's face, and you could tell she was not accustomed to having her husband tell her no. I mean, it was shocking to her. And he said, "You don't understand. These are the people that gave me enough credit so that I could get my first job. And if it weren't for Sakowitz Brothers,
We wouldn't.
you wouldn't be able to buy that dress.
That's right.
We're buying it here, and that's it. And I'm telling you, it teared me up. I mean, it's just what a wonderful sense of loyalty.
Cheers you up.
Yeah.
I mean, what a story.
And that was Houston. Houston had this wonderful, almost committed feeling of community. And that's what helped build Houston.
I mean, I think even modern, for people that don't know Houston, but I think even in today's modern world, obviously not as good and as tight as back then, I still think it's such a community city.
It is. But when I went to college, and that was in Boston, in Cambridge, I noticed the differences. And when years later and I was in business, I said, let me tell you the difference about Houston. In Boston, when you say, I've got a new idea and here it is, and this is what money that I need, and this is what it's going to do and how it's going to, work out, someone will say, well, they tried that about 10 years ago and it didn't work, so I'm not interested. Houston, you do that same thing, and the fellow says, well, they tried that 10 years ago, but let me tell you why it might not have worked and how we can make it work today.
Yeah. Might not work then, but I think we can make it work now.
Yeah, it's a can-do city.
Yeah,
and,
it is.
And
That's a good analogy.
That's
a good analogy.
Just,
hey, Robert, let me ask you a question because I forgot. So, sure. The first store they opened in Galveston, was it Sakowitz? Or
Sakowitz Brothers. Well,
Sakowitz?
Actually, it was first called The Globe, Globe, The Globe.
The Globe.
And they changed that because people who were their customers said, it's the two of you brothers, it's Sakowitz Brothers.
Yeah.
So they changed it to Sakowitz Brothers.
Yeah.
And our logo was Sakowitz Brothers until 1965, when our family bought out the Simon Sakowitz's great uncle side of the family.
Okay. And then it became only Sakowitz.
And then it was the Sakowitz logo.
So it was always Sakowitz brother until then.
Yeah.
Okay. It's funny because you say that, you know how people were back then, or you study about this stuff, and people were probably, even though the name was the Globe, the people that were buying from there were probably saying like, hey, where'd you get those cuffs? Oh, we got them from Sakowitz Brothers.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
That's
They never said the Globe, it was those guys.
Yeah.
I got it from those guys.
That's right.
And so that made common sense to change it to Sakowitz.
And that today, incidentally, because I have been ever since Sakowitz closed, which we'll get to later, but I've been doing business strategies and marketing and business development, sort of multi-industry and multinational for 35 years now. And when people keep talking to me about branding, I keep trying to explain to them that branding is not a verb. You can't go just brand something. You can create a logo and you can create a name, but a brand is something that is earned by people having confidence in the product, having see it perform over the years, having the integrity behind it. That's a brand. You can't just say, I'm going to go brand this. They're misusing it. You can create a logo, like I said, and an identity. But a brand is when something stands for something.
You're taking it to the next level, which is the loyalty of the brand.
That's right.
The loyalty of the brand.
And they called it brand loyalty.
For sure. So when they're in this building, 5 floors, it's still Sakowitz brother.
Still Sakowitz Brothers.
Okay. At what point does your dad get involved?
My father graduated from Wharton School of Finance in June of 1929. So just as that new store is opening up, Dad's graduating from college. And of course, 3 months later, all of his classmates didn't have jobs. Wall Street and all this sort of stuff from Wharton, University of Pennsylvania. And that's when he became involved. As I said, the 30s were relatively good to us. And when the war broke out, my grandfather was one of the 3 members of the Selective Service Board for the region. And Dad was in his 30s, and he couldn't think of seeing his father send all these young men to war and him not participating. And so the Army said, at your age, you don't carry a gun and go out in the field. It takes 7 men to put 1 man in the field. And you need to be one of those back here, basically helping us with what today we call supply chain. What back then was just allocation and merchandise and manufacturing and the whole system of distribution, from design to manufacturing, all the rest of it. And for that reason, when he enlisted, he got a direct commission, and we moved. My sister was born in 35, and I was born in 38. And so I was 3 years old when we moved to San Angelo, Texas, because Dad was in charge of what were then called PXs, post exchange, because that's where you got your mail. But today they're base exchanges, BX. And everything went through the PX. Literally all of your coupons for beef and for gasoline and for all of that, and had to be monitored. And Dad ran 2 post exchanges, one at Concho and one at Goodfellow Field, Air Force. So he was in the Army Air Corps. And both of those, Concho and Goodfellow, one was a bombardier school and the other was a navigator school. And the bombardier school, do you remember the movie of Dr. Strangelove, when Chill Wills at the very end is riding the bomb down, like this? They actually, I think, got that off of the patch for the bombardier school, which was Bugs Bunny riding the bomb down,
oh my goodness,
chewing on a carrot.
That's excellent.
It was just wonderful.
That's great. All right, so your dad goes off into the Army. When does he come back?
He comes back at the end of the war, 1945.
And then he goes right into the business again? Yeah. Mm-hmm. At what point does he take a piece of ownership in it?
Well, he had a piece of ownership from the point of view of being in the business.
Heir, right.
Heir of his son. So he had some stock. But if your question is, when did he really take over management? Mm-hmm. I want to say that was in the, I'll go back and look that up, but I think really became president in 51, when we built the expansion from the Gulf building from Main and Rusk to Main and Dallas, which was actually this store, the white marble store downtown. Mm. And you see the logo is Sakowitz that way instead of Sakowitz Brothers.
But so that is the first time Sakowitz is owned.
Is Sakowitz rather than Sakowitz Brothers.
And what year was that?
This store was built in 51.
Okay.
Opened in 51. And this now has an expansion into not only apparel, men's, women's, children's, china, crystal, silver, gifts. And when I came in, I modified that and added fine and rare wines, art, and all kinds of other stuff.
So the move to that building that he built closes the five stories.
The Gulf building, yes.
Right. Okay. And from there?
And from there, it expanded. 56 added the Gulf Gate store. The little boutique in the Shamrock Hotel, when it opened on McCarthy, funny story, Glenn McCarthy built this mammoth, Shamrock Hotel, the story in Giant, you recall. And he wanted a women's shop and a men's shop to take care of the guests of the hotel if they'd forgotten something or wanted to buy something. And about less than a year after it opened, Glenn called my father and said, I want to come down and see you. And I said, sure. So he said, Bernard, I don't understand how you people ain't make any money at this damn thing. It's ridiculous. I don't want this thing. Will you please take it over? And so we took it over as a separate little company called the Shamrock, Sakowitz Shamrock Shop.
Interesting.
So that was late 50s. And then 59, we opened Post Oak and Westheimer. In 57, 58, I was in college, and we sat on the corner of Post Oak and Westheimer and counted cars. And that was our marketing study. And of course, 610 Loop had been announced, but otherwise it was a cow pasture. There's nothing out there. And fortunately, Houston just kept growing and growing.
Did that become your flagship store?
The downtown store remained the flagship store until, I want to say, the Post Oak store was challenged with the Galleria. Originally, the Galleria opened in 69. We opened this in 59, 10 years earlier. And the Galleria then expanded in the booming 70s. If you recall, the oil embargo in 73, 74 by OPEC that embargoed the United States skyrocketed the price of oil. And so
They limited the supply.
they limited the supply, and so much less to the United States. But of course, in Texas, it was booming, and it made for huge fortunes. So Saks Fifth Avenue, Lord and Taylor, Marshall Fields, all of them came in to Houston, the Galleria. They wanted a piece of what they called the golden buckle of the Sun Belt, Houston. So we expanded from the Post Oak store being 109,000 square feet to 220. Well, this one was 225,000 downtown. It was almost a whole block, 3/4 of a block. But the Post Oak store, we expanded so that it became the flagship after that, because it was the shopping
Also,
area.
it kind of became
Downtown,
that Galleria.
right? And downtown continued to have this outward push to suburbanize. I mean, Houston's 770 square miles now.
Is it a fair comparison to say Sakowitz was like the Saks Fifth Avenue of Houston? Or
Yeah, they used to say Neiman's is Dallas and Sakowitz is Houston. And when I became president, well, let me go back. After I graduated from college, I was potentially faced with the draft. But after I graduated from college, before that concept of the draft, I went to an internship in Paris at Galeries Lafayette department store, and was there until I heard I was up for the draft and I better come back, and I enlisted in the Air Force Reserve. So I came, and I was the 6 months active duty, and 5.5 years every month you'd have, weekend warriors, they used to call them. And fortunately, we were never faced with anything specifically except the Cuban Missile Crisis, and we were called up for that, but then we stood down. But after that, I came back, Galeries Lafayette, the Air Force, and wanted to go to Harvard Business School, and needed to probably have a math refresher course to apply, go ahead and go to Harvard Business School. And my father said no. And I said, what do you mean no? And he said, no, I want you to apply to the executive training program. It's a 2-year formal program at Macy's Herald Square. And Macy's creates great executives, and I want you to see if you can get into that. If you can get into that, I'll help support you in New York, because you're not going to get paid anything. Which I did, and which turned out to be a really wonderful move for all of the things that I learned on my father's part of making that suggestion, because then we had an agreement I said, because my sister had married someone from New York, he came down, tried to work with the business. The seniors said again, "Oh, you got to be this for 2 years and that for 2 years." And he was very ambitious, so he moved away to make his fortune in real estate in Florida with Lynn, which did not occur. But they moved away, and I took that as a lesson. And I said, I'm only coming back if you give me a specific job at a specific salary, and we're not reporting to anybody in the family, reporting to somebody else, sink or swim. And it turned out that after 2.5 years at Macy's, my father called and said, we just found the buyer of the Young Houstonian department, which was a complete department on its own, on the take. She had outfitted her entire living room, furniture and all, through vendors paying for it. So she's gone. It's an entire junior world of dresses, coats, suits, sportswear, accessories, everything, you know. The salary is $6,000 a year. Report in 30 days. Sink or swim. This is back then.
Right.
Went into Macy's and.
So where was corporate? Downtown?
Yep, sure.
Is that where you
downtown?
Is that where you reported to?
Yep.
Okay.
All.
So when you come in
operations.
and join the corporation,
62, 63.
are you? How many stores do you guys have at that time?
We had downtown, Gulf Gate, little Shadnock shop, Post Oak, okay, yeah, and it wasn't until 4 years later, and that was the first store I actually had the opportunity to really plan with Raymond Brockstein on my own. In '67, we opened Town and Country Village.
So you had.
That's four at that point with a little boutique.
And you opened a couple years later.
And then, I want to say 10 years later, I'll have to go back and look at the numbers, but we opened a whole concept called Sakowitz 2, little Roman numeral 2, so that everybody could differentiate between expectations of a whole Sakowitz, because there's only 35 or 40,000 square feet. Joe McDermott, who was the developer with Dan Moody of Town and Country shopping center.
So that'd be your equivalent to a Nordstrom rack.
Yeah, exactly.
But you did it before Nordstrom rack. Yeah. So Sakowitz, and again, correct me where I'm wrong, because I grew up in this town and I remembered Sakowitz was. Is it wrong to say high end?
No, it was.
It's high end.
We launched the first in '67. It turned out that the French couturier, and people mostly don't understand, and why would they, but American designers in the fashion industry start off being the design person for the manufacturer, like Maurice Rentner was the manufacturer, and Bill Blass designed for him, and ultimately it was Bill Blass for Maurice Rentner, and then Bill Blass. And I mean, that's the way it grew. But in Europe, they always had haute couture meaning that it's made on the body. Couture comes from cousure, which means to sew. And so those designers had to go to a school. They had to apply. There are very, very strict rules and regulations to be a member of the Chambre Syndicale de la Couture. Couture was made custom. And there was a little ready-to-wear, but that was when Maria Carrillo and Mendez, and it's in the book, you can read it, they would buy a model from a couturier and then have the rights to manufacture that in what was their measurements and sell it in ready-to-wear. But they didn't have the ready-to-wear industry that we had, that was mostly really developed from the sizing they learned in World War II.
Yeah, I mean, again, I remember it's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful store. I would say probably the most high-end or prominent store that you wanted to buy from in Houston at the time, would you?
You know,
You know?
it was, and I don't mean that.
No, I think it's what it was.
It
It's
was.
what it was.
Fact was, that's what people told us.
That's what it was. Sakowitz was.
Because we also, and it was a very specific strategy on my part. You see, we started in the men's business, which I've outlined to you. Neiman started in the women's business. And they added men's as we added women's. But they were in the women's industry very well entrenched in Dallas. And so they had all the exclusives of Norman Norell and all the American top designers. We couldn't get them. When they bought the fashion in 1955 in Houston downtown, they bought a store. That store had the equivalent kind of lines and exclusivities. And back then, the exclusivities counted. You know, we had Picky Freeman and, different exclusivities. I didn't have that. And so, as a strategy, having worked at Macy's and seeing the competition between Macy's and Gimbel's, Gimbel's had started a little phrase that was, does Macy's tell Gimbel's? As a little competitive thing. Gimbel's was a third the size of Macy's, but that elevated them to the same.
Right.
So I sort of tore a page out of that book. And when I heard that in the late 60s, the mid 60s, that Andre Courrèges, who was a member of the Chambre Syndicale, and Jackie Kennedy's Onassis, one of her designers that she loved from France, was going to make ready-to-wear, his own ready-to-wear in his own atelier. That was shocking. That was, for France, that
Because
was
you weren't ready
unheard of.
to wear, right?
We were in ready-to-wear only. There wasn't couture. And so I flew over and made this deal. And it's, again, outlined in the book as to how we took first the bodies from the French didn't fit. So I took the American designs over there and gave them to Courrèges. Anyhow, Courrèges, Yves Saint Laurent, Givenchy, Valentino, we ended up launching those, not just in Houston or Texas, but in America. And so the European fashion headquarters was Sakowitz. So Neiman's had their New York, and we had this, and all of a sudden, when they turned around, I never forget Stanley telling me, because his son was a classmate of mine at Harvard, so we knew each other. He said, we didn't realize it, but all of a sudden we turned around, you had all these names. And that helped make us
Stand out.
we had art
Separation.
galleries in the store, one of the first in America to do that. Fine and Rare Wines. Specs opened in '62. When we opened our wine department in '67 with Michael Broadbent from Christie's in London doing the Sakowitz wine auctions, and I used to give wine seminars for 26 years. We had those auctions, and when Specs started, it didn't have a single Premier Cru or a Deuxième Cru. They didn't have the major chateaus of Bordeaux, and we launched that. So we did a lot of innovation of different things, and that got us a lot of publicity. And you could say, you're just an ego hound. Wrong. The reason for doing that is because if you had the name and you wanted to expand, but if you had the name, other manufacturers, other producers would want to sell to you as opposed to Neiman's. Give us the exclusivity instead of Neiman's. So works out, they'll give it to Neiman's in Dallas and us in Houston. So it was a strategy to basically help
Now,
to develop expansion.
you came into corporate setting what year?
I'm sorry?
What year was it that you came to the corporate setting that you were in?
I came in as a buyer of the Young Houstonian in '62, '63. My father had his first heart attack in 1965. He was 58, I was 26. And as he's coming out of the ER, he's got tubes in his mouth and up his nose, and he's ashen gray. And I'm holding his hand when he's on the gurney. And he said, I'm going to feed you with a fire hose because I want you to make as many mistakes as possible while I'm still around to try and help. And literally within a year.
This is him out of the hospital?
On the gurney.
But after surgery?
Yes.
Wow.
And he...
I love that concept, though, because sometimes I have kids in my business, and you think, how much do you press? How much do you push? Yours is, we're going to throw you in the deep end,
Yeah.
and I'll be your lifeguard.
That's right.
And I'll pull you out if I need you, but we're going to throw you in the deep end and get ready.
You got it. That was the metaphor. And fortunately, I swam. Fortunately, I ended up doing the European stuff. Yeah, I was 26. So when people say, how do you know some of those older people? Well, it wasn't that I was so smart. It was that I was representing this company. So I was a member of the Chamber
a young
of
guy
Commerce.
representing the old guys.
I was a member of the Chamber of Commerce, the Convention and Visitors Bureau, and all of these different civic things. As Executive Vice President, General Merchandise Manager, Sales Promotion Director, literally by the next year.
How long were you as president?
Well, I was Executive Vice President and General Merchandise Manager. I said Sales Promotion Director until 71. So from 66 or 67 to 71. And then my father had another heart attack. And in I became president of some of the subsidiary companies. And then in 73, he had another heart attack, and literally at a wonderfully touching ceremony, turned the gavel over to me, and
So he survived that one.
he survived that one.
And that's when he
year.
officially turned it.
Yeah.
He said, all right,
He said, "You've been running it anyway."
you got water hose in,
Yeah.
your hose down.
Yep. He wrote me a beautiful note. But it said, you've been running it anyway, so just keep me informed. And the following year, he had a massive heart attack.
Third one now.
Yeah. And he went literally the way all of us want to go. He was and we built a store in Arizona, 74. And he was out there and had a heart attack. Well, no, Mom called him in for dinner and walked in to change clothes for dinner, had a massive heart attack, and died right there. Fortunately, no pain, So then we continued the expansion. And as I was saying, the reason why we wanted to build up the name was not only because of those lines that we wanted to carry, the products, but also that was the era of the expansion of all the malls, the 70s and the 80s.
Yep.
And so malls had a formula. Mel Simon, DeBartolo, all of the big mall developers, they would either sell an anchor spot to a major store at a very reasonable price, or give it to them even.
Right.
So that they could then
draw the people.
But they would, the stores could use that real estate to borrow against to build their store, facilitate the financing. And generally it was anchor, and then they would fill in, and they'd make their money on the leases of the fill-ins of all of the smaller shops. That's how so many of the Victoria's Secret and all those guys ended up making so much money and expanded so much, because they could go to put themselves in, let's call it, I'll just use a round number, but in the dozens, let's call it 24 molds, and that's small because they grew to be, 240. So they would go to to the Far East. And when you negotiated, because I started this in Hong Kong and China, literally I was in China 1 month after Nixon, 11 months, 1 year after Nixon and Kissinger. And you'd say, okay, how much is this garment? And how many? First question is how many? And you'd tell them, well, for our stores, maybe you'd want 2 dozen or 4 dozen, something like that. So he'd give us a price point. Well, I learned very quickly, okay, what's the break point? And he'd say immediately, without any hesitation, 50 dozen. And I said, what's the next break point? And then that was 100 dozen. And so once those shops, like the Limited, could buy maybe a dozen for each store, but they had all these stores, they could make those minimums and have very low prices. And so that's how they began to develop. So the whole industry on a global supply chain that we worked on until recently was built upon a lot.
So when did Sakowitz close?
Well, when oil hit $49.75 was the peak.
Is that like 86?
And in 85, June of 85, oil hit $8 a barrel. And we had a quarter reporting, and the banks were financing our inventory and receivables. And we had a consortium of 5 banks. 3 of those 5 banks were underwater. I was chairman of the Houston branch of the Federal Reserve, so I knew exactly what kind of problems the banks were having. And they looked at this, our second quarter. And the second quarter, we had, of our financial covenants, we had 17 financial covenants in the loan agreement, and 3 were off by less than 0.5%, and they called the note because they needed the money.
They were just looking for an excuse to call the note.
Absolutely. So I had to file a Chapter 11 for restructuring,
Right.
So I did that. And for literally 27 months, which they won't let you do now, the law has changed, but we were in every 90 days, we'd go back to court to meet with the creditors committee and the judge and process and all. In a Chapter 11 and it's called a Chapter 11 of the code, there's a 7, which means liquidation, but an 11 means that you can find somebody other end. You're looking for a bridge, and somebody over here is going to help bail you out, and so you then pay agreements with the creditors committee. Well, those creditors, want their money. They want as much as they can get, though. And I was trying to find somebody as a partner. We narrowed it down because at the high point we literally had downtown, Post Oak, Gulfgate, Town and Country, NASA, Champions in Houston. It's 6 in Houston, plus a Valentino shop and the Shamrock shop, a store in Midland, a store in Amarillo, a store in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and a store in Scottsdale, Arizona. We closed everything. At the high point, we were 2,253 employees. And the worst thing I ever had to do in my life was to let those people go. We were a store family. And we narrowed it down to the 4 stores in Houston of closed downtown, of Post Oak, Town and Country, NASA, and Champions, one of those 4, and tried to rebuild. And that was 80, 85, 86. I actually had been asked to chair the sesquicentennial for both Harris County and for the city of Houston. And I went into Mayor Whitmire and I resigned, offered my resignation. under the circumstances. And she said, Robert, Houston is all in pain. You've pulled everything back to Houston to believe in Houston. Why would we want to do that? No, you stay there, which was a nice vote of confidence. And so I did. And but I mean, Houston lost, 125,000 employees, people. And
Yeah, I remember.
86
I remember
90
reading something about 2/3 of the city.
were impacted.
Were impacted.
84. No, I was on the chamber board and all that. Over 80%, 84% of Houston employment and involvement in the economy was some way or another tied to oil and gas.
I mean, that's crazy.
And
84%
it was huge.
is
It's down to the 40s now. But now, even though the Texas Medical Center was there and the port was there, they had not grown as much as they have now.
they had diversified.
So now Houston has diversified to the extent that, we are the largest port by tonnage in the United States. We are, when the Panama Canal opened, and I was involved with that with a company that did all the scenario-based planning modeling for the Panama Canal Authority to get their $5.3 billion to build the new locks. That assisted Houston substantially. NASA, of course, in the 60s, and then grew. All of that and the Texas Medical Center, the largest medical center in the world, has made for Houston really being a major force and
not have all their
economic
eggs
force.
in one basket. So, okay, remind me again, the year that your great-grandfather opened the store in Galveston was when?
The first store in 1902,
1902.
and we closed downtown. We closed after I found someone to help us come out of the Chapter 11. It was a company called L.J. Hooker from Australia, largest shopping center developer in Australia. And he had bought Bonwit Teller in New York and B. Altman in New York. Well, that is because they had been part of a conglomerate of, like Foley's was part of Federated. They were allied stores, like Josky's and Dillard's were part of that.
All these names from
They were liquidated. Yeah, they were in a Chapter 11. So I came up with the idea, and our banker in the bankruptcy case was Chemical Bank, said, we'll help you finance this. When I came up with this idea of getting Bonwit Teller in New York, Garfinkel's in Washington, and Sakowitz as a combined confederation. And they said, okay, let's help you finance it. This guy Hooker came in and bought Bonwit Teller and preempted it by a much higher multiple, so we couldn't buy it. But I contacted them. I said, how could we get it? Long story short, they helped support us coming out of the Chapter 11. So they were my big brother, so to speak. We then built a store in Cincinnati where they wanted us to go because he bought a shopping center there, and so we went there. We built another store in Dallas. This is with the new Sakowitz. And a new formula. We don't have time to go into the differences of merchandising and marketing, but it's very different. And then the flash crash came on Wall Street. And Prime Minister Hawke, there's an old expression on Wall Street, if you sneeze on Wall Street, the rest of the world catches pneumonia. Well, Prime Minister Hawke changed the interest rate in Australia from something like 3 3/4 to like 8 or 7% or something. And Hershkew, who was the CEO of L.J. Hooker, was using some short-term money. And he had a consortium of 30 some odd banks.
Gotcha.
And they called his note. And so everything was liquidated.
It's all paper until they call it, right?
That's right. That's right. And if you think those guys are on your side,
They're not. It's all paper until they go, hey, you know what?
Yeah. And so Bonwit Teller was closed nationwide. Garfinkel, all of us were liquidated. He called me, the CEO of L.J. Hooker, Michael Babcock. And it's, again, starts one of the chapters called The Chaotic Conclusion. He called and said, Robert, you're fired. And I said, what? And he said, everything's being liquidated, and you didn't build up your family's business to see it just be liquidated piece by piece. So we're going to hire somebody else to come do that who's a professional at it, and good luck.
Wow.
I didn't know what the hell I was going to do. I had 4 kids, married.
But
I
you know,
lost.
as cold as that seems,
Oh, it was. He
He
said,
was
"You're
right.
going to thank me." He said, "You're going to."
He was right.
He was right. But I mean, I was just lost. I mean, I had lost 90% of my net worth, which is tied up in Sakowitz, because we invested everything. Because the banks wouldn't let us pay dividends
right?
because they wanted us to continue
sure the
growth
cash
and
flow.
make secure. So I didn't know what I was going to do.
So the store closed when? When was the end of that era?
August of 1990. So it
Nice.
was 88-year run.
Wow.
So
Is there another department store that's that long?
not on its own. In other words, they've been like Neiman's
Bought several
sold
times,
and,
yeah.
you know, bought and sold one, and
Yeah.
Saks Fifth Avenue. They've all been, not as an independent. No. The name, sure. I mean,
Yeah, yeah, 'cause
Neiman's
they buy
is
the name.
there because they buy the name.
88 years is unbelievable.
So that was my store years, and that's what this book is all about. It's called More Than a Store.
Well, I want to talk real quick about you personally now, but
Sure.
just to recap the story of Sakowitz, right?
Yeah.
Incredible. If you guys don't know Sakowitz, if you're not from Houston or Texas or one of these areas that has Sakowitz, look it up. This was the place to shop, top of the line, premium, luxurious store that everybody talked about. Sakowitz, 88-year run.
Let me interrupt you for one more minute. One of the reasons wasn't just the merchandise that we carry. We would have annual festivals every year that were theme-oriented, like the Festival of Romance, the Festival of Great Religious Cultures from all over the world. And we would bus in. I worked out a deal with Houston Independent School District. And we would bus in students and give them guided lecture tours. We had one that was called the Festival of the Arts. And we had 132 extraordinary paintings. You couldn't do it today. The Portrait of Maria Teresa by Velázquez, 3 Monets, Manet, Degas. I mean, incredible art. And all these people had a chance, all the customers, I mean, just walk by and see the art. And we said, education is incredibly important, because if you want to understand why something's worth something, you understand the quality of the make. And so we have to show the art of shirt making, the art of dressmaking.
Yeah, it's not just a shirt.
Right. We had to,
There's a story behind
we
it.
thought that explanation of quality made a huge difference. And so we would have these festivals. We did all sorts of civic stuff. And so it was because it was not just a store that people said More Than a Store. And they'd say that to me. It's a Houston institution.
I very much agree with that. I very much agree with that. All right, quickly.
Yeah.
So, born and raised in Houston, incredible heritage from Ellis Island and Galveston, this incredible career, Sakowitz, family name and brand, 88 years. Where'd you grow up? What part of Houston?
Our house was in Riverside on North McGregor Drive, and lived there until I went away to college and came back
And you went to college in Boston, Cambridge,
at Harvard.
Harvard, yeah.
Went to St. John's School here.
Okay.
And I graduated from St. John's and went to Harvard.
Okay. And came back, worked in the family business. What did you do after that call? What was your...
I didn't know what I was going to do, and a buddy of mine who had been the Arthur Anderson accountant who worked for us during the restructuring said, look, just bring your stuff over. I've got an office for you. Just come on over here. Just bring your stuff, because you got to get out of there. About a month passed with me sort of trying to write up a resume and things like that for headhunters. And I got a phone call from one of the fellows that I work. We'd be at the Paris and Milan and London fashion shows together. He had a store called Creed's in Toronto. And it was like a Bergdorf Goodman in New York, really high-end specialty store. And he called and said, Robert, we got some real problems and you've been through all of this. And we'll even pay you to come up here and help. And I said, what's the mission? To turn the company around? He said, well, if you can do that, it'd be great. But really, we think it's too far gone. Two things. We want you to help us get off of our personal guarantees working with the banks, because you know how to work with the banks, because I was on 3 bank boards of the Fed, as well as working through Sakowitz stuff. And stop the family from pointing the fingers and killing each other, because everybody's blaming everybody else. And it's got to stop. And we can't do it. And you've been through all this. And I said, well, let me call you right back. So I called up my friend Bob Ogle from Arthur Andersen. And I said, I know what a consultant does, but how do you get paid for this stuff? What do you charge and all the rest of it? And he said, well, you know, you've been on all these bank boards, you've been on Continental Airlines board, you're on more shoe company board. You'd be a partner at Arthur Andersen. So this was back then, $350 an hour, keep track of all of your expenses and your hours. Ask them for the first 20 hours, so send you a check for $7,000 and a ticket, and then go up there. And I said, okay. So before calling him back, I mean, I even wrote a note to myself, which I still have, of, you know, can I really do this? Will I be taking money under false pretenses? I mean, what if I don't succeed? I mean, I just had all kinds of, you know, doubts about it, you know. But I called him back and I said, okay, and told him what Bob said. He said, you'll have the check and the ticket FedEx tomorrow. And I flew up there and got it done and succeeded with it. And then I got a phone call from IKEA, who retained me to help them figure something out. And then Saks Fifth Avenue, and then Highland Village, and then the Mills Corporation, and then an oil and gas business. And the consulting just ended up being multi-industry and multinational. Food business.
One, you knew the business, an incredible resume and experience. And that knowledge only comes through time.
And that's the reason, you're absolutely right, is through experiences. A friend of mine, so this is my first book, which is called More Than a Store. A second one is about the ultimate gifts of the Sakowitz Christmas catalog, which is a wonderful 9x12, which is being printed now, of the ultimate gifts that we had in our Christmas catalog. That was on the Johnny Carson show and Good Morning America today. All of those. Neiman's had their his and hers. We had the ultimate gifts, and it was like that, all over the press. Anyhow, that's a relatively smaller book. But the third book, which is more about because this is just those 30 years, those decades. The earlier years, just like you've asked, and experiences of growing up. And then the consulting years, which is now 35 years in multi-industry stuff internationally. A friend of mine, we were together at lunch with his closest friend from California. And he had asked me what I was doing, and I told him the consulting. He said, you know, it makes a lot of sense. A lot of people want to always hire a consultant who's known this business for 25 years or all that stuff. You know, so that's 1 year, 25 times, as opposed to you being able to come in and say, well, I tried this here, or this worked with this, and this one with that, and can this adapt here and that, which I do. And he said, you know, there's knowledge, which is institutional knowledge, book knowledge, from Harvard, for instance, that you learn.
You're intelligent.
Yeah. And then there's the experiences and all of the circumstances and things that you've done. And, you know, that experience and knowledge, you put those together, Robert, that's called wisdom, and you got a little wisdom. And I said, what a nice compliment.
Thank you. I think he's, 100%.
So the next book, which is writing all of those things, is called Putting Wisdom to Work.
Yeah, I love it. You know, when I got promoted to my first big position, and you know, power, authority, corner office, all of that stuff, my boss comes in and sits down across from me and he says, "Don't do anything." I'm like, "What?" Just don't do anything. Just listen. Just go around, meet the customers, get to know the business. He goes, "I can teach you everything except time. You need time." I thought it was the best.
In the military, they used to call it time and grade.
Okay.
Time and grade.
Yeah. And he was right.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It didn't matter what you knew to that point. Nothing teaches like experience.
That's right.
And you definitely got it. What's your favorite food?
My favorite what?
Food.
Wow. When? I mean,
What is your typical go-to?
I still love French food. I love Asian food of all sorts. Italian food. Barbecue. I mean,
But French, you put French first. You love French food.
Yeah, but I guess so.
Okay.
You know.
Your typical, I mean, if you broke it down in percentages, what is the percentage when you ate the most? French?
No, because there are not that many French
Well,
restaurants.
there's not as many French ones here.
But
yes.
you know, as the Italians call it, modificato. You know,
Modificato,
it's a little,
yeah.
a little modified.
Modificato.
You know, so I'll do that. But frequently Italian food, Asian food, Mexican food, of course, Tex-Mex. You can't live in Texas and not like Tex-Mex.
Yeah, no, I love Texas.
So
Texas is
a lot of that. And it's kind of like people say, okay, because I've been in the wine business for, you know, since 67, and helping people and lecturing and on boards and stuff. And so
You do know why.
I'm
I mean,
familiar with the little wine.
in the few months that I've known you, you know why. Like I would never challenge you to a wine, you know, knowledge of.
So people will say, well, what's your favorite wine? And I'll always say, with what?
Yeah.
Because it depends on what it's accompanying. So it's kind of like, what's your favorite food? What's your favorite
Right.
wine with
Okay,
that?
I like it. I'll go with that. Of all the places you visited, what's your favorite?
Wow. Well, it's kind of a hackneyed phrase, but obviously I love Paris. I worked there. I was there for 4 or 5 times a year for over
Fashion
30
city,
years,
yeah.
and all of that. The wine, going down to Bordeaux and Burgundy and working in all of those areas, south of France. So I love that part of the world. It's not the same now, but Hong Kong used to be just a fascinating place. I loved it. It was the whole the Chinese concepts. It's fascinating to learn, and so I really, places that I've loved. That's another.
That's good. Hong Kong has never really been mentioned on our show, which is great. Paris obviously is a fascinating city.
Sure.
And you were there for different reasons. You were there for the fashion, and talking about Bordeaux, Chateau, and I may say this wrong, so don't kill me. Chateau du Le Pape, the wine.
No, Chateauneuf du Pape. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yes.
Chateauneuf du Pape is not in Bordeaux, even though it has chateau in the name. Chateauneuf means the new chateau of the Pope, which was in the southern middle of France, south. Chateauneuf du Pape is that area there. Okay. So Bordeaux's over here.
Because I had that wine at Bordeaux.
Yes.
And I thought it was
But a Chateauneuf du Pape
Do you like that one?
is, oh yeah.
I love that
I'll
one.
tell you why I like it.
I was scared to tell you that until you told me, it's terrible.
Oh, no. I'll tell you why I like it. Because in Bordeaux, for the most part, you only have 3 to 4 grapes, red and white, and maybe 5, 6. And in Burgundy, you have maybe 3 or 4. But in that entire Hermitage and Chateauneuf du Pape region, you have 14 different grapes. So you're blending.
Well, that's what
as
I
opposed
understood,
to a
that-
single.
Correct.
Yeah, so instead
My
of
understanding is
just
13
a Cabernet
grapes.
Sauvignon or a Chardonnay, that's a single grape. These guys blend,
Yes,
and that's the
that is
magic
correct.
of it.
That is correct.
And so I like I like that.
Okay, great. Good. I'm glad. We did good. We did good. What is the car that needs to be in the Robert Sakowitz Museum?
I had a Lamborghini Espada that wasn't happy until it hit 125 miles.
Of course not.
And it just hunkered down.
Of course not.
And we drive up to the ranch, and there was this 38-mile stretch that I could really just let it out, And that was fun.
That's great. That's good. Good times. Good times. Is there a place that you haven't been to yet that's on the top of your bucket list?
I'd like to go to the Galapagos. I have not been there. Been lots of places, but I just have not been there and made the time for it.
Okay.
No excuse, sir.
Yeah.
Just
you got to make it happen, right? That's at the end of the day. All right. Tell us about your book.
The book is, as I said, it's called More Than a Store, and that's the downtown store, 51, white marble store, and the rodeo parade going in front.
Oh, yes. Yes.
So you want to see the definition of Houston and Sakowitz and me is, okay, here's the rodeo with we had a cattle ranch in East Texas and loved it. And here's this sophisticated store. And I kind of loved the counterpoint of that. Someone took this photograph and we made it into a postcard for our stores and all of that. It's a series of vignettes taken after, and I don't mean that I'm anywhere near the author he was, but when I was at St. John's, we had a book about this thick that was called The Collected Short Stories of Ernest Hemingway. And they were from 3 to 35, 40 pages, except for one chapter that was 88 pages called The Fifth Column that was a play. But everything else was little snippets, vignettes. There are 55 vignettes, and it's the 3 decades of my career that started in 1960 and end up closing in 1990. And, I mean, it literally starts off basically saying, well, here's the introduction in part 1, part 2, part 3, but, 41 to 48 pages, 18 to 26. So you can read 3 or 4 chapters and go to bed.
Right,
It's not anything
right.
like that. And they're all historically founded, but they're all different things that occurred, people that with whom I encountered. I mean, there's the Duchess of Windsor and Imelda and Ferdinand Marcos, and I mean, all kinds of people. The India, the culture and business, Festival of Fantasy, Yves Saint Laurent.
Is this your first book?
Laurent. Yeah. Well, I've written and delivered 67 speeches to various places in the world. I mean, China, Paris, different stuff. But I've written articles that were published in magazines, but I've never written a book. And as this thing says at the very beginning, many people have queried, you've had such a fascinating life. Have you written a book? You need to write a book of experiences of my own places in the sun, shade, and shadows of interesting events. That's what this is.
That's great. I love it.
And so there's 3 inserts of photographs of different things. Here's the Festival of the Arts with a portrait of Maria Teresa, a Picasso. I mean, just a lot of different things. Here's Courage and myself, NASA, all about different stuff in Houston.
Wow.
A rock jubilee that I put together in Houston that was the first rock festival in Houston following Woodstock. And we had the Byrds, Poco, the Grateful Dead, and the Jefferson Airplane. It was amazing.
Wow. Where can people get the book?
Well, right now, probably the best way is to contact me. My company is Hazak, Hazak, Harry, Apple, Zebra, Apple King.com, and it's R Sakowitz at Hazak. But I'll be putting it on Amazon. I'm talking to a couple of the bookstores here for having it for local, but I'm going to try and do it obviously on a national basis.
Yeah.
So literally the book arrived 2 days ago.
Wow, good timing. Good timing.
Good timing.
Well, I'm going to read it. I love the story. I love you. I love the
got
history
it.
of your family.
It's yours.
Oh, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And Robert, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
Appreciate it.
Pleasure, sir.
Thank you for listening to Wheels, Deals, and Meals, your main source for all things good and fun, business, food, and cars. If you like this episode, make sure to rate us and subscribe. If you would like to be a guest on our show, please leave a message at the link below. Till next time, happy eating.